Hey everybody, welcome to LDS Singles Anonymous. My name is Buzz.
I'm Mackenzie.
My name is Josiah.
On today's LDS Singles Anonymous, we have a very special guest, and a special guest that has different views and perspectives that we do. So, Josiah, can you give us a little bit of history on who you are, where you're from, and maybe what makes your view of single life different from our view?
Well, do you want the long version or the short version?
Whichever you prefer.
I'm originally from California, but I haven't lived there for a very long time. I left for my master's degree. So I did my undergraduate in California, did a master's in New York City. I lived in New York for many years, lived in Washington State for a year, did my doctorate in Florida, in Miami, and lived in Texas for 3 years, and then moved to Utah a little bit over a year ago.
Okay.
So I'm a university professor, and I sell real estate on the side. I'm a realtor. And why do I offer a unique perspective? Well, I got baptized into the Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ 2 weeks ago. So I have been single and dating on the single scene for, all of my 20s and my early 30s as a non-LDS member, and now as a member, very, very recent new member.
Yeah, that's certainly a unique perspective, one that we don't normally see. The fact that you've lived in very cool places, New York, California, those of us boring people, I've lived in Arizona all my life, so I know the Arizona scene too well. But interesting to see different scenes, and obviously you're well educated. You
In principle, on paper.
You know what? Paper matters.
I've got the letters after my name.
That's
Yes.
that little business card when it's got lots of little letters at the end. That's nice. It certainly doesn't hurt in the dating scene.
I don't know. That's a great actually assumption to unpack, because I was always of the mentality that it would help. Because it is pretty well documented in the literature, social psychological literature, that women tend to date across and up social status hierarchies, and men tend to date across and down. So on paper, according to the literature, it helps. But anecdotally, at least for me and some of my friends, we find that in certain dating scenes, it's actually a disadvantage because it scares certain types of personalities away. Some people think, oh, this guy's he's too brainy, he's too intellectual. I want a guy who's more down to earth. I want a guy that's going to go skiing with me, and then go to the pub after.
Okay.
I don't want some guy who's going to talk my ear off about philosophy and art and want to go to galleries.
Okay.
And,
See, I figured it would be the different way to say they are so dedicated to their education and their occupation, obviously, that they don't have time for me.
Statistically, that is the average sort of response, and that's the positive response, is that, okay, this person's well educated, they have a good career, they're more likely to be, culturally, whatever the word is, cultured. I hate that word, but cultured. But there are people who have the exact opposite reaction. They think, oh my gosh, this person is probably going to be pretentious, stuffy, intellectual, boring. Huh. So it's very context dependent.
Is it that people tend to come in with a no in their minds and just say no because of this, no because of this, and they don't go, let's meet the person and see what they are and then make up our mind?
I think it's more complex than that. I think there's two really big things that branch off into layers of complexity. The first one is, what type of relationship are they seeking for? And obviously in the LDS community, the assumption is you're looking for a long-term partner, not just marriage, but eternal marriage, ideally. When you're not in the LDS community, it's a real thing where people, they just want a short-term relationship, or they just want somebody to date for a little while because they're bored or they're lonely. Not everybody in the non-LDS dating scene is looking for a long-term relationship, and you'd be shocked how many people are openly, especially if you get on dating apps, I'm just looking for fun, or not looking for anything serious right now. Yeah, that's part of it for some people. For a lot of people, they're coming out of a long-term relationship, and maybe they're even recently divorced. And so they're trying to sort of recapture the excitement and perceived freedom of being young and not tied down. Some people have deeper psychological commitment issues. Some people it's practical. Like I see when I was not in the church and was on dating apps, you would see a lot of women who are traveling nurses, for example. And so it's not that they're never want to get married. It's just that, hey, look, I'm in a new city. Dating people is a great way to start to build a friend network.
Right.
But look, I'm not going to be here long term, so let's
Right.
not get too involved. So circumstances matter. So and that's a whole big category that completely changes the way that people react.
Yeah.
So you have a different set of criteria. And again, this is anecdotal, but this is also very well documented in literature. If you look at sociological studies, because it's all been very well studied.
Sure.
When you're asking women, they do these randomized trials where they get a huge group of women and they ask them to rank dating profiles, and they make a bunch of fake dating profiles and they tweak one variable at a time. So you can actually see en masse what the impact is of if everything about the dating profile is the same age, same profile photos, same attractiveness, and then all the same salary, everything, and they just tweak the height. Taller men are more attractive to women on average. There's exceptions, there's variance, but on average, taller women are more attractive. And it's crazy because the perceived attractiveness is the number of the height, right? Same thing with salary. You have the exact same dating profile, and all you do is you bump the salary up 50K or 100K. Women rank that person more physically attractive, even though it's the exact same profile. So you can also then filter out by the women who are looking for, like, ranking attractiveness for a fun fling versus ranking attractiveness for marriage.
Okay.
And those diverge.
Sure.
So the stereotypes of bad boys are totally true. So musicians,
Yeah, that's
artists, borderline gangster type folks.
Right.
Those women rank them as being higher attractive for pure sexual attractiveness. This would be a wonderful person to have a one night stand with,
right?
Or a short term fling with. But then women completely flip around their categories, and on average, again, there's an exception, but on average, they tend to value for looking for a family, right? Building a family, someone who has a higher paying salary, more, a job, a career path that demonstrates conscientiousness,
sure,
right? That demonstrates emotional stability. So that's a huge category that influences the way people react. So I don't think you can make a total blanket statement as to why somebody's having success or not. A lot of it has to do with the context of the dating pool and what they tend to be looking for. So, but then even within those groups, there's a huge divergence of personalities, right? So some people like to follow those sort of general trends that are well documented, which is, again, women tend to date across and up status hierarchies and men tend to date across and down.
Right.
But there's a lot of individual variance in that, because some men, just personality-wise, like powerhouse women. And so they're totally fine with dating a woman who's got a higher salary, maybe even more driven than they are, more career-driven. That does tend to lead to conflicts later on, because unfortunately it's also very well documented in the literature that women who sacrifice family for careers, a disproportionate number of them, when you normalize it for personality differences, a disproportionate number of them express regret, that they feel, or maybe regret's too strong of a word, they feel they're acutely aware of the sacrifices that they made for their career.
Okay.
So, and a huge number of women who express interest in career over family in their 20s, that flips. And again, there's exceptions because there's a huge amount of variance within the group of women, but on average, you do see a trend where by the time women hit their early to mid 30s, the same women who they've tracked who in their early 20s said that I would put career over family in my hierarchy of personal life importance.
Right.
That flips, and they start to realize that I think family at this point would be more important than career.
So these sociological researches that you've seen, how do they play out in real life? Is this something that you see on a day-to-day basis in the single scene? Or is it something that we see on paper that maybe doesn't show up in the real world?
That's a great question. You see it, but again, it's really context dependent. So you have to, and this is a key thing that I've learned over the years in general, is to start to see those trends that are documented in the literature. You have to hit high numbers, right? And so it's a very basic thing about statistics. Is it's just like flipping a coin. Like everybody knows that if you have a fair coin and you flip it, you've got a 50-50 chance of flipping it, right? And this is the gambler's fallacy, though, is one of the several things that gets lumped under this category. But one of the gambler's fallacies is that people underestimate how long it takes for the law of large numbers to play out. So the law of large numbers is that, yes, if you have a fair coin and you flip it 1,000,000 times,
right,
after flipping 1,000,000 times, you're going to get to roughly 50-50 distribution. But in the short term, you could get 10 tails in a row, even with a fair coin.
Correct.
Right? And from that local data set, you would conclude that, oh, this coin is not, this is not a fair coin. Yeah, I got 0 out of 10 heads and 10 out of 10 tails.
Right.
And what a lot of us forget, it's easy to forget if you don't look at dating with that kind of cold scientific sociological perspective of numerically numbers. It is a numbers game. If your dating pool, so if you live, what does that mean? Well, if you live in a small community, even if you're in a big city, but you're LDS and there's not a huge LDS dating population in that city,
right,
you're dealing with a small dating pool.
Right.
And so you can have an experience where maybe you've even dated 50 people, but in the grand scheme of things of the 300 million people that live in America, you've dated such a small that you could have a completely biased personal.
Right. You've only flipped a coin 12 times.
Yeah. So getting the numbers up, I think, really matters. And so from that comes this idea that like I've experienced completely different dating experiences based on where I've lived.
Right.
So when I was in big cities, it was way easier to date people, and especially when you're in a big cosmopolitan city and you're a musician. I'm a music teacher.
Okay.
And so I'm an artist. And so, it's very easy to meet people at gigs and at art galleries who are a higher statistical chance of having common interests with you. Like by definition, I'm an artist, I'm at an art gallery, or I'm a musician, I'm at a gig. People who show up to music gigs like music, right? So when I was in South Texas, though, it was brutal. Part of it was that the pandemic hit after like 7 or 8 months of living there. But South Texas, the part of South Texas I was living in was small town and relatively homogenous. Like at least 80% of the population was Hispanic and, evangelical Christian or sort of,
Okay.
So it's a very, very different experience there.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is we like to look at things on paper. We like to see numbers on paper because that's what makes sense. The problem is I'm only one person. So even if I dated a bunch and flipped the coin a bunch of times, I'm still only one person. And there's things about me that are going to cloud that data from being applicable in my life.
Yes, we all have biases. And the other issue that I can't emphasize this enough, especially as I start to open myself up to risk of being attacked by people, because I'm painting with a broad brush. It's always important to remember that I'm talking about averages.
Absolutely.
And averages tell you nothing about individuals.
Correct.
And so
but that's what these studies have to be.
Yes.
These studies have to be numbers.
Yes.
They can't take an individual into account.
It's a very important point that with any group, the variance within a group is always greater than the variance across groups when you average them out. So it doesn't help you at all to make judgments.
Correct.
And so it's important never to discriminate against individuals for that reason.
Right.
But that being said, we can learn something about how to increase your chances on average, and so for men, taking on more responsibility on average, having a higher paying job, focusing on those types of things actually get you more bang for your buck, so to speak, on the dating scene than focusing on physical appearance. And unfortunately, it's the opposite for women, unfortunately. The most bang for buck you get is focusing on your physical appearance because men are very shallow.
Yes.
On average, as a group, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So
you're going to find very few men that are going to say that that's a lie. And the ones that are going to say it's a lie are the ones that know inside themselves it's kind of true, but I really want to say it's a lie.
But even then, again, that doesn't justify any specific action. Because what is attractiveness? Some people are attracted to super athletic people.
Correct.
Some people are attracted to super skinny people. Some people think super skinny people look like concentration camp victims, and it's not attractive at all. Some people like women that wear a lot of makeup. Me personally, that's a huge turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it comes across as being very fake. and also to me signals, maybe I shouldn't be this biased and prejudiced, but to me that signals that that's more likely a high maintenance person. I want somebody that I can travel with and get up and on the spur of the moment go on, hop on a different flight or a different train and not have to wait for everybody to get all, dressed up and have the makeup done. And so there's incredible variance within that, and we see that across cultures, like some cultures in the Pacific Islands really value very, very large round body types, and other cultures value more athletic body types. And even in Western art, that's changed a lot.
Right.
Over
Well,
time.
all we have to do is reverse back in time a little bit. There's certain spots in time where athletic, fit people, that means they don't have enough money to eat.
Exactly.
You want a nice,
Exactly.
big, plump person which says, I have status, I have money,
and I don't have to
power.
do manual labor. Yes.
Wow. Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
Not that long ago, if you look at female and male body types in the movies in the 1950s, even like the so-called the muscle big strong dudes. If you look at them from the 1950s, they don't look anything like Arnold Schwarzenegger did when he was Mr. Olympia. They're more square. And they didn't even have six packs. Like they were more likely to have just kind of be built. What we would call now today somebody who's built but not cut, right?
Yep.
And somehow during the late '60s, going into the '70s, that changed into this more like Greek statue, or I would argue an exaggeration of a Greek statue.
Sure.
Because if you look at Greek statues of athletes, they're not as bulked
Correct.
up as Arnold is. So these things change over time. And same thing with women, like Marilyn Monroe. I don't know what size she would be in today's women's clothes, but
I think they said at
Like a
one
size
point she was wearing a 12
12
pant.
or something like that.
She's
Yeah.
very beautiful.
And just like you can adjust for inflation, you can adjust for size inflation as well, because I forget what direction it went for women and men, but I know like the so-called sizes have changed over time as well. So even those numbers you have to take with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
I know at least with men's clothing, the trend in
inches,
modern times,
they change
inches
a lot.
change. So like what used to be a 28 is now like
Wait,
inching.
seriously, the inches on them change?
Yes. So
How?
if you go to many men's, because they can get away with it. If you go to many men's clothing stores and you compare like a size 30 now from a size 30 like 20 years ago, today's 30 is bigger.
What?
Because psychologically we want the men to think, I'm still
I'm still a
like,
30.
even though I'm getting a beer belly, I'm still a 30.
Well, and
Right.
Levi's did a thing is when the width was greater than the length, because they used to do on the back, you would say 34 was width inseam. As soon as the waist was larger than the inseam, people stopped buying Levi's. And they went, okay, we got to do something about this.
What were they wearing then? It's not like you can just not wear clothes because your waist is bigger
No,
than
you
your
just-
inseam.
You find some other brand that doesn't label it that way,
okay.
or that
I
But I mean,
guess.
all of that. Just to go back to my point, all of that's just to say that there's incredible variance. But the men tend to rank physical attractiveness higher on average, and women tend to rank status. And on that note, something that I learned by looking at some of the literature, the sociological research literature, that completely shocked me, and it shocks most people unless they already know this, is that. So I'll ask you guys, what do you think of all of the popular mainstream dating apps and services like eHarmony, Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, Coffee Meets Bagel? There's a gazillion of them
LDS
now today.
Planet.
Plenty of Fish, whatever they all are. Of all of those, which one do you think leads to the most long-term relationships?
I know eHarmony tries to say they do.
They try to say.
And when they don't, they buy the company that
does.
is beating them.
Yeah.
I know eHarmony, or the parent company for eHarmony, has bought 20 different dating sites.
Yeah,
So-
most people tend to think it's the eHarmonies of the world. The ones that ask you the most information.
Right.
And that they gather all this information. They've got this really complex algorithm, and you know a lot of information about. No, it's Tinder.
Really?
Tinder.
Yeah, that surprised me when you told me that.
Yes, but it's a fact. But once you realize it, why, it makes a whole lot of sense. Why Tinder? Why is Tinder? I mean, we don't know for sure, but most likely, why does Tinder lead to the most long-term relationships when most people consider it a hookup app? All right. Well, the reason is that the more data you gather, the more you actually get to layer your own biases and false ideas about yourself, because you want to present yourself as a certain way, and you think you know what you want, but you don't really know what you want. And whereas Tinder actually kind of more emulates the real world pre-internet, where if you wanted to go on a date with somebody, you would just kind of glance at them across the room and go, okay, that person's kind of attractive. And then you just kind of walk over and strike up a conversation without really knowing anything about them at all.
Let me get to know them in the real world, not
Exactly.
you
And
filter them out because they said they liked the wrong movie.
Exactly. When in reality, maybe they don't even like that
Or they
movie.
don't
And
like
they just couldn't
tacos.
think of any movie
Right.
to put, you know.
Right.
And so, yes, you filter out potential matches and you kind of become drowned in too much data and you rely too much on the algorithm and computers.
Sure.
I mean, and maybe eventually computers will be more intelligent than us, but right now computers they're more intelligent than us in narrow tasks like doing
Right.
calculations, but they're not more intelligent than us in perception. And that's why even Tesla with its neural network, Tesla cars still make mistakes that human eyes would never make.
Right.
And so if Tinder emulates the real life thing of what makes you want to go on a date with somebody, it's that initial chemistry and interaction of just like 3 seconds. Is this person attractive or not? Yes or no. And the other apps focus too much on the other data, and they've already filtered out people. And I mean, that goes to, I can speak to this personally as well. Until I started living in Utah and kind of opened up my mind a little bit and thought more openly about religion, because for a period of my life I was very against Christianity and very against organized religion in general. And even 2 years ago, not even that, even a year and a half ago, maybe even just a year ago, if you had told me that you would be dating an LDS woman, much less forget about joining the church. Even if you just told me I'd be dating an LDS woman, I'd be like, yeah, right, ha, 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 that's funny. Nice joke.
Yeah.
Never going to happen. And I never would have thought I would join the church. But I got a little bit more open-minded about that. And so, I never would have met Mackenzie if I had been that closed-minded, because she put right on her, we met, full disclosure, we met on a dating app for me on the cell phone. I don't know if it was on the phone or the computer for her, but so on a phone dating app. And right up front, it was, LDS was all over her profile, and she made it very clear that was important to her, but that she was open to exploring, dating somebody who's non-member. And by that point in my life, I had gone through enough personal tribulation that I had actually changed my mind on a lot of things. I didn't think I wanted to get married. I changed my mind on that. I didn't think I wanted to have kids. I changed my mind on that. And I wasn't sure if I would ever date somebody who was, had like a traditional sort of, what I would consider like a traditional conservative religious viewpoint. And I changed my mind on that because I started to think about the people who I see out in society who have the most stable marriages, who seem to have the most happiness, who have the best sort of family structures, and realize that, well, there's, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Right.
And the people who have those things, faith in God, a marriage where they have at least a temporal commitment, if not an eternal commitment, these things tend to lead to stronger family units and more self-reported happiness over the course of the marriage. So I wouldn't even be in the position I am if I hadn't kind of opened my mind to that. And so if I had set the filters on any one of these apps to like completely filter out Christians or completely filter out LDS people, I wouldn't have met my current, romantic partner. So
My philosophy is dating is a used car lot. You can't order exactly what you want. There are no warranties that
There's
they're going to come and
limited inventory,
fix.
yeah.
There's a limited inventory, and you come and you say, I've got a little list of what I want, and you go and you say, okay, it's got to be a 4-wheel drive, it's got to do this, it's got to sit me up high enough in traffic, and you see a red Miata and you go, oh, I'm in love, and you go buy it and you take it home, and it's the most wonderful thing, and yeah, the one door lock kind of sticks a little bit, but that's okay, and you love your Miata, and it was nothing that you wrote on.
as long as the transmission's good.
Right. Well, we're not talking about a real Miata. We're talking about, a theoretical.
Yes.
But yes, you come and you fall in love with something that's completely opposite of what you thought. And all the data in the world and all the computers and all the AI in the world will never understand a human heart.
Yeah,
Because a lot of times we lie, like you're saying, we lie to ourselves. What do I want to what do I really want?
And attractiveness really is important, and chemistry is important. But it's also important to note that it doesn't always have to be a spark of that happens right away. Because when you get involved with somebody, and as you get emotionally and spiritually involved, that chemistry and that physical attractiveness can grow. Like it can be like a slow burn, like an organic, long growth. And it doesn't always have to be that like the first time you see somebody, it's like the Miata, right? It's like the Miata. So it doesn't have to be that way necessarily.
Right. Oh, you can.
But yes, there's something fundamentally mysterious about the human heart and human relationships, and this is not new either. You know, before I joined the church, I had kind of studied for a few years Buddhism. So I've read many of the holy texts of Buddhism, and maybe I shouldn't even say holy texts because it's more philosophical than it is religious for the vast majority of it. And this is one of the things that they talk about a lot that I think actually Christ talked about indirectly, which is that, it's one of the fundamental principles of Buddhism is that you can never really know yourself, right? Just like a fire can't, these are the metaphors they use, a fire can't burn itself, a light can't illuminate itself, a knife can't cut itself. We're all looking out at the world from our own soul, our own spirit, our own center of consciousness. And so we can't turn that light around. So we're always a little bit of a fundamental mystery to each other. And me personally, I would go a step further, and I also think, and I know this is not a very popular opinion in today's cultural climate, but I also think that men and women are fundamentally, there's something always going to be fundamentally mysterious about each other to each other.
Yes.
And I think those are great things because I think life and dating and relationships, not only would they not have any fun and adventure and mystery, but I think actually ultimately they would have no meaning. They would have no depth if there wasn't difference.
You can't grow if you're around everyone that's just like you.
Yes, and so the Buddhists, they actually equate identity and difference. They literally say identity is difference and difference is identity. So if there's nothing different from you in your relationship, then actually the relationship has no identity and you have no identity.
Right.
And I think Christ said similar things in a more roundabout way. Some of my favorite quotes, just from Sermon on the Mount, like when he tells people to be childlike, not childish, don't be immature,
Yeah, big difference.
but childlike. And what are children like? They're trusting. They love without they just love people without ripping them to shreds too much. They have this sense of wonder and newness and freshness about the world. And the other thing that he says that I think is along this line of kind of the fundamental mystery of the universe sort of thing is he also said think not on the morrow, right?
Yeah.
Which is like we want to think that we have it all figured out and that we have this data and that we're going to if I check these boxes, I'm going to find the right person. But it actually doesn't work that way. And that's what trust and love and faith are in any relationship, even in a romantic relationship.
Well, and really all we do in this world is prepare for the morrow. Is we try to make our life today easier tomorrow than it is today. Whether that's through education so we can get a better job, or we're working hard at our job so we can, or we're putting money in a bank account or a 401k, or, almost everything we do is trying to prepare ourselves to have an easier life tomorrow. And
there's always something fruitless about that too, because you never know what tomorrow's,
Right.
You never know when the day or the hour is going to be.
Right.
So you save up all your life savings and then tomorrow, something crazy happens.
Right.
Christ could come tomorrow. So you don't know until it happens.
Right.
So
maybe that's one of those balancing acts. We need to prepare for tomorrow.
Yes.
Because not preparing is preparing for disaster. But also be aware that things are going to change. And all the preparation I do, maybe not enough or maybe too much because I'll be called up tomorrow.
And that's why I think he said that. I don't think he said that because we're supposed to necessarily take it literally. And thank goodness, I hope that interpretation is true, because if it's false, then every person on the planet who's a Christian with a few exceptions is getting it wrong, because he basically said sell everything you own and go preach my name, right?
Yeah.
And stop worrying about tomorrow. But we all do that. So why would he give us an injunction to do something that's basically impossible for us to do, with the exception of a few monks, living in some monastery in the middle of nowhere, right? I think it's actually similar to Zen koan. So Zen koan is basically like a psychological or spiritual problem that a Zen teacher gives you to go ponder. And a huge percentage of them don't have any solution. They're absurd. Like they'll tell you to go and imagine what's the sound of one hand clapping. And people really go and they try and figure this out until they realize that there's no way to figure it out because it's stupid.
Right.
It's absurd.
Right.
And so the point is actually to make you realize that you're asking for like a spiritual authority outside of you. So that's absurd. It's like asking a teacher instead of asking the Holy Ghost, basically. Ultimately you have to do what Joseph Smith did and get on your knees and ask God, right? Well, and I haven't even talked
But-
about the obvious things that most people probably want
I
to
do
know.
think it's funny when
Oh,
guys are like, "Oh, women, blah blah blah," and I'm sitting here and I'm like, "Yes, I could tell you about that as a woman, but let's hear your data."
Well, I'm
We're
just
talking
data.
statistically. We're talking
Yes,
about a
that's
million
very true.
women that we're all pressing together to squeeze out a couple of data points.
I mean, I guess
Yeah.
the probably the thing that everybody wants to hear, especially if they've never left the church, is what's it like to date when you're not LDS?
Actually, yeah. I'm
Well,
curious
there's
to
a
hear.
lot more fornication.
Okay, that's actually not what I was curious about. I thought you were going for not a member dating someone who is a member, because there's a huge difference, I would imagine, in like the value system of what you do
Yeah.
along the same subject of what you just brought up. So, like, what was that like for you when one of our first conversations was, "Hey, by the way, I'm a virgin and I'm not gonna have sex with you," and you,
Yeah.
and you were like,
I was like, that's
okay.
fine. That's fine. Because at that point in my life, I had, again, like I said earlier, I had come to the realization, both anecdotally, because I had had some pretty rough relationships with people, that we got too committed too fast, and we got too physical too fast. And so I shouldn't say committed. We got too physical too fast, so we got too attached too quickly. So I have no problem at this point in my life with actually slowing down on the physical front. And also, when you're, like I said, when I realized that, probably what I really want realistically in the long term is somebody who's faithful and true to their word and more likely to be a stable person to start a family with. I was okay with all that. But from the outside perspective, like, yeah, my friends and family, if they knew, I don't divulge the details of my like dating relationships
Sure.
with them. But if they did know, they would think it's crazy, that especially my friends in Europe, where they're like, "Oh yeah, you've been dating someone for 2 weeks and you haven't slept together? What's wrong? Do you guys not like each other? Like, how come you're not sleeping together already?" So it is very different. And the vast majority of my relationships in my 20s, actually, I'm pretty sure almost all of them, except maybe one, in my 20s and my early 30s, we slept together like within a matter of hours or days of meeting. So it is very different because the expectations are different. And a lot of men, unfortunately, put too much of their self-esteem into whether they can make that happen early on in a relationship as well.
Right.
So there's a lot of internal and external pressure. And then it puts women in this awkward position because women don't want to be perceived as being too easy or too like morally loose. But at the same time, they also don't want to lose a guy they're potentially interested in because
Sure.
because he wants more than they want out of it. So it's not, I don't know what perceptions people might have because I didn't grow up LDS, so I'm only guessing. But if people have this romantic idea that being out in the non-LDS single world is somehow like more easier, more fun, or less stressful, it's not. You're just swapping one set of problems for another.
Sure.
So if you're in a small town and there's not a huge LDS population, okay, that's a problem. Like you don't have a big dating pool. But it's not like if you move to a big city and don't believe in God anymore, all of a sudden it's easy. It's that no, now your problems are like you have all these people and maybe you want a committed relationship and a huge percentage of them don't.
Right.
And a lot of them are going to be pressuring you or feeling pressured to get too physical too early. And then you get your hormones all mixed up and you stay with somebody longer than you should have because really you're just having good sex, and you don't actually have a long-term compatibility, and then there's all the issues about people move in too early and without commitment, and that almost always leads to problems, and again, that's very well documented. I mean, which changed my mind was actually looking at the research on that. It's like, look, people who don't sleep together before they're married report higher satisfaction from their marriage and higher satisfaction from sex. People who don't get married don't move in together until after they're married, they're more likely not to get divorced. And I mean, there might be noise in that data. It might be that, there's some confirmation bias that, okay, the populations who are more likely to abstain until their marriage are more likely more conservative, and there's more likely more pressure on them to stay
There's
together.
way too many
Also, when
asterisks in
those-
that data to say,
when that
Yeah.
data was
bam,
taken
that's the
even
law.
culturally.
But
so.
But where there's
put a
smoke,
lot
there's
of-
fire, and it's not just that we have research on it today. I don't think it's an accident that almost all human cultures that I'm aware of have some form of sort of rules and ethics around sexuality, and they have some form of like marriage, right? Of people committing. I think there's a power in that, especially if you want to have children at some point, but even if you don't, of just saying, look, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, but we seem to be doing pretty well. So let's make an agreement with each other that no matter how hard this gets, unless it gets past certain clear thresholds like physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, so on and so forth, crime. Unless it gets to those extremes, we're going to try and work it out. I think there's a lot of power to that. So it's tough out there for the non-LDS people too, especially because now you have a big problem of values and standards right off the bat, compatibility issue. Like, and again, I've got mixed feelings about this because, again, if you look at the research, apparently personality compatibility is more important than values and religion. So if two people have compatible personalities, even if one's Muslim and one's Christian, they're actually more likely to stay together than two Christians, but if they have really bad mix of personalities. But that being said, when you're not LDS, that becomes an issue. Like, you like somebody, but maybe they're a different religion, or maybe they're of such a different culture that there's compatibility issues that you might blow through early on because of the physical attraction. Whereas if you're LDS, well, at least, hey, look, on paper, we're on the same page about a lot of stuff before we even, start dating.
Well, and that's one thing I had never thought of until you said that. The fact that if you're dating in the LDS church, the chances of you finding someone who wants a family, who wants to settle down, who wants this and this, is a lot higher and a lot more stable than
well, and even more
outside of the
fundamental
church.
things like that they believe in God, that they believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff. So it's tough out there for non-LDS people. And then once you switch over, that creates challenges though too, because I'm framing all this with like, hey, look, I'm in a great relationship and it's doable, but what I'm saying is that there's challenges from both sides. And so once you are, all of a sudden, in some ways it gets easier, in some ways it gets hard. Like, all of a sudden you really have limited your dating pool if you're not going to date outside the faith. So that's the obvious one. But then also, and this goes along with just converting in general, because I'm a very recent convert. Although a lot of these lifestyle changes, I've already been headed in this direction. But suddenly, a lot of people would not think about this. Suddenly, bars are out of the question. Basically for a dating pool. And it's so funny because even before I converted, like, I was barely drinking. I didn't really like drinking. But I would still, go do a gig at a bar as a musician. And if there was a cute woman, I would invariably walk up and strike up a conversation and give her a business card. And it's surprising I was shocked at how many times that worked.
Right.
Like, they would call me. I would say, hey, give me a call if you want to have a date. And they would call. But none of those went anywhere.
Hang on. Because I play in a lot of bars, and I've never got a date from a gig in a bar in my life.
Yes. Well, you have to have a good script. And I'm in real estate.
I do not have a good
We believe in scripts. And so I'll give you guys some tips. Try it. Don't take it too seriously, but try it. So one of the things that people don't like in general, there's exceptions, but even if it's a single woman in a bar and maybe she actually is looking to get a date, people don't like to feel trapped. Sure. So don't walk up and start a conversation with no out. So rule number one is I always preface it by saying, hey, look, I'm playing a gig, so I've only got 5 minutes on my break, and then I got to go back on the bandstand. But you're really cute. I'm a jazz musician. I'm a professor up at the U, and I'm a realtor. Here's my real estate business card. If you want, and this is one of my sort of cute little scripts I made up. If you want to learn more about jazz, if you want to buy or sell a house, or if you want to go on a date, here's my number. Shoot me a text or give me a call, and then you walk away.
Very open.
So you're super open, but it's not a hard sell.
Right.
And you put the
ball's
ball
in her court.
You put the ball in her court.
Well, you also
You're not
didn't
asking for
focus
her
on
number.
the romantic side either. So, as
Yeah.
you said, any of those things.
Yes, exactly. And you'd be shocked how many of those people actually text you or call you for a date. Sometimes, like, within hours, they text and start flirting.
Wow. So, any final thoughts? Any final thoughts on in and out of the church, dating in general, what you're looking for, what you find that people are looking for, and is it true that as we age, we're maturing and we're realizing all the things that we thought were cool when we were 22. Maybe not. Maybe it'd be nice to have someone to come home to and have a family and have somebody that accepted me long term rather than for 2 weeks or 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in there. The last thing you said, I do think is probably generally true. Again, there's exceptions. But just for me personally, I guess my most powerful sort of dating testimony is from personal experience. And I really did change. And it took a lot of relationships that didn't go anywhere, that were great relationships, though, great relationships. And only 2 of my breakups in my entire life were really kind of contentious. And even then, the last one, it wasn't really anybody's fault. I just happened to be in a relationship with someone who had childhood trauma. And we're still, and even though they were 40 years old, they were still working through some childhood trauma, and so that led to problems in the relationship that weren't really anybody's fault, you know. So you go through all these relationships, and even though the relationship is great, they don't end up right. And sometimes it's from life circumstances. I've moved around a lot, but a lot of times it is because people really aren't quite sure what they want, and then by the time most people kind of hit their mid to early to mid 30s, you're not a kid anymore, you know, and you do kind of tend to be a little bit more settled in your career, a little bit more settled geographically for most people, and your personality tends to be a little bit more stable. And so people tend to, I think, see that stability in themselves and want something a little bit more comparable. And I think that's natural and healthy. And I'm not saying that it has to be that way or that it's good or better. I just think it's pretty common, and it certainly is the case for me. And I do think that for a small percentage of people, again, anecdotally, because I know a lot of musicians, they really fight that and they pay for it later in life. Like they still want to have a party lifestyle and date and sleep around a bunch in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And then they wake up one day, without naming names. I have a friend who's a well-known musician who married a woman from a foreign country, and he was in his 50s and she was in her late 20s. And inevitably, it led to a separation. I don't know if they're talking about getting divorced or not, but he's been absolutely devastated. But this was a guy who really partied a lot and slept around a lot, you know. I mean, would be dating 3 different women and sleeping with 3 different women at once. Just went totally nuts for the first, 30 years of his adult life. And now he's completely devastated. And the cynical part of me is like, dude, didn't you see this coming? Yeah. You know, you fooled around your whole life and you didn't really take relationships or sex seriously. And now when you finally do get married, you marry somebody who's way younger than you. You know, you should have seen this coming. And so I think, unfortunately, that happens to some people. Yeah. So I think dating in general, my final word is keep an open mind, because that's what's led to the best outcomes for me. Keep an open mind, get yourself out there, and just always remember that you don't really know what you want, until you find it maybe. Right. And even then, there's always a little bit of doubts. And so for me, it's kind of like faith as well. Yeah. Me personally, I don't think I have all the answers, but you still get up every day and, say your prayers and read your scriptures and renew your covenants every Sunday. So. Right.
Well, because when we're in our stride, we are going to learn things down the road. But as long as we have that faith to keep going, and whether it's in a relationship or whether it's just making the best us that we can, we're making those strides, and we're going to learn something new tomorrow. And we're going to learn some. And as we pick things up, we're going to change, and our views may change, and our personalities may change, and some of it's just calming down through time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, keep an open mind. Keep an open mind to who I'm going to be in 10 years, but keep an open mind to who I want next to me in 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great advice.
What was it like dating a non-member who told you that he was never going to convert?
That's a whole other episode there. Are we wrapping up or are we ramping up?
Let's wrap up, and then we'll re-ramp up.
Hey, sounds great.
All right. Hey,
to be continued.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this special session of LDS Singles Anonymous. If you like this video or want to see more, please please subscribe, do all the things that I don't even know what they do about bells and ringing this and that. But this is LDS Singles Anonymous. Thanks for watching.